So, Crema, the developers behind this game, had a dream. The dream was a creature collecting MMO. Think Pokémon, but actually multiplayer, actually online, and actually a shared world where you could run into other tamers, trade, compete, build something. And the game they made was Temtem, the original. And honestly, it was genuinely good, especially since Pokémon had been ignoring it for years. The creature designs were interesting, the battles had real depth and strategy to them, and the world had personality. The problem wasn't the game, the problem was the intended audience. Standing in MMO is brutal. You're not just competing with other indie games, you're competing with World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, games that have had a decade to build infrastructure and communities. Temtem launched into early access and built a dedicated fan base. It hit full release and then slowly started bleeding players. Not because it got bad, but because the hardcore players it needed to sustain the MMO model were just not enough. There were many systems that catered more to a hardcore fan base, leaving casual players to simply beat the bosses and leave. Breeding felt frustrating rather than interesting. Shiny hunting, or Lumas as they're called in this universe, was irritating. There was no good way to ensure that your shinies could be good in competitive terms. There weren't enough hardcore players that liked these mechanics to actually sustain an MMO. And Crema made a decision that probably hurt. They announced that they were winding down active development on the MMO. The game still exists. You can still play it, but the dream of being a living, breathing, shared world, that chapter is closed. So what do you do after something like that? If you're Crema, apparently you make it Survivor-like, about the same creatures, and somehow you make it pretty good. So what is Temtem Swarm? Temtem Swarm is a bullet heaven Survivor-like. That's the vampire survivor genre if you're not familiar. You pick a Tem, you move around the arena, enemies filter in from every direction, you level up mid-run, pick upgrades, you try to survive until the timer runs out or a boss kills you. That's the genre. You know it, it's everywhere right now. It's oversaturated, and some are saying it's getting a little old. Personally, I love this genre. I have a bunch of them on the channel, and I'm going to keep covering them and keep playing them. But I think it's because I like that now that it's getting oversaturated, you see games like this, where they have to come up with actual interesting mechanics and ways of differentiating their game. What Swarm does differently starts with the creature system. You're not just playing one character, you're building a roster of Tems that you can use on different maps for different situations. They have their own ability, their own skill tree, and their own typing. And that's important because you have to remember, maps have a predominant typing that all the enemies spawn with. So, just like every other good Pokemon-like, there's a rock, paper, scissors system based around some elements that you're gonna have to know. So you're kind of relying on mastering these Tems and these mechanics for success. That and good RNG, but, that's always going to be a risk in Survivor-likes. And then there's the prestige system. Each Tem can be prestiged. You reset them. They get weaker, and you unlock permanent upgrades that compound over time. It sounds miserable, and for about an hour or so after you prestige, it kinda is. Then you start to see how it reshapes the whole meta. Suddenly you're thinking about which Tems to run through prestige cycles and what order. You realize that the game has a lot more going on than the art style suggests. The prestige system is interesting because when you prestige a Tem for the first time, it gives a buff to your entire account. So every Tem on your account gets, for example, with one Tem, you get plus 10% HP. And that buff applies to everybody. But it also gives that specific Temtem its own prestige buff to add to its already existing talent and passives. So, I want to spend a minute on the difficulty of this game, because I think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. The game looks adorable, colorful creatures, bright patterns, bouncy animations. It reads like something you could put on the background and coast through. It's not really. The early game kind of feels like that, but the late game stages are legitimately demanding. The boss patterns require actual attention. The modifier system lets you stack debuffs on yourself for extra rewards, can turn a manageable run into a complete disaster if you're not paying attention to what you modified. And because of the prestige system deliberately weakens your Tems, there are stretches where you genuinely feel fragile in a way that requires you to actually strategize about your movement and how you approach the game, rather than just watch numbers go up. Which, honestly, this is a good thing. Most Survivor-likes lose me around hour 15 because the power scaling gets so extreme nothing feels threatening. Swarm has enough scaling to keep runs feeling dangerous longer than most of the genre manages. It's not flawless. 1.0, their recent review score dropped into a mixed territory at launch, 62% in the last 30 days. And some of it is people reacting to the 1.0 price bump, but some of it is actual criticism. I say this because this is a very common thing in the industry when doing an early access game. 1.0 has a price bump. When you are adopting early access, you're getting a discount because you're not buying a full game, and you're technically helping them develop the game. But back to the real criticisms. The stage variety is limited enough that you'll see the same maps more than you'd like. Truthfully, I actually don't think it's that the stage variety is limited. In many other Survivor-likes, there are actually less stages than in this game. However, I think the grind the game demands of you makes the stage variety variety feel limited, and we'll get to that in a second. The skill tree, while interesting, is more of a leveling system than a skill tree. You're going to 100% the skill tree, prestige, and then do it again. You will unlock every level of every node. Just depends on which order you do it in. Some nodes are more powerful and can help more early on than others, so keep that in mind when you're prestiging your Tems. The biggest problem, though, is the grind. Yes, while grinding is something that feels quite at home in the survivor-like genre, Temtem Swarm, much like Temtem, piles it on far too thick. Many unlocks are hidden behind the "good, you unlocked that, now use it in a run to unlock the next thing" style of progression. For example, when you 100% a Tem's tree, you can prestige it, setting it back to 0, getting a passive for your account, another passive for that specific Tem, and then you also gain their Luma or Shiny skin. But it's really, you 100% their skill tree, now you need to complete a run like that. Now you can prestige. Now to get your Luma, you need to complete a run like that. And this sounds like a small problem, but imagine that across every single unlock in the game. And before you know it, the game is requiring you to put in hundreds of hours just to see everything it has, which some say is good, but some of these unlocks are just cosmetic, and others are very small stat boosts that you don't necessarily need to play the game. I personally am one of the mindset that the amount of grind should fit the reward, and I feel like in this game, and the same thing with regular Temtem, that balance isn't quite there. In the beginning, before you begin the prestige grind, you can share progression currency, allowing you to use your favorite Tem and push the others along without playing them much, save for specific skill tree unlocks. Once you prestige, each Tem can only progress their own tree, making unlocking everything quite the tall order. So, the verdict? Temtem Swarm is $12.99, currently 30% off for $9.09. I've put 65 hours into this and I'm still going back for it. For the genre, that's a pretty strong signal. You bounced off Vampire Survivors because you felt it was too shallow, or you want Survivor-like with actual long-term progression? Buy it. The prestige system alone justifies the price for people who like roguelites with some mechanical weight. It just also comes with a lot of grind, and you need to know that. If you're looking for something you can coast through, something with a gentle difficulty curve, laid-back vibes, this isn't that. The cute art is a trap. And wait if you want to see where the developer is taking it post 1.0. They've earned some trust back with this one, but there are some concerns about the lack of content. People want to see more maps and more Tems, and we'll see what the studio does with that feedback. Personally, again, I've put 65 hours into it and counting. I will admit that I like having a game that I can grind. If that is your thing, then you'll enjoy this. If that's not, I'd steer clear. The studio went through something probably pretty devastating after making that MMO, and what they built out of that experience is a genuinely fun game. That doesn't happen as often as it should. But you do need to know the pros and cons, and that's what I'm here for. If you guys are actually interested in picking up this game, I will have a tips and tricks video up on the channel later that you can check out so that maybe it'll help shorten some of that grind for you. Anyways, guys, if you made it this far in a video, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. I'm trying to grow the channel right now, and every little bit helps. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. I stream on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, so feel free to stop by and say hi. And guys, as always, I'll be back later in another video. Peace out.